intended to be a semi-informal workshop specifically for Indiana communities to learn from Indiana communities. So we'll do some short presentations, and then we will hear from our 3 panelist communities about their SolSmart experiences, and then we'll open it up for questions. So if you would please type your questions into the chat box. The ERI team will be choosing which questions will get asked. But if we continue to be a good sized, a medium-sized group, then we'll give you a chance to ask your question directly. So we'll screen the questions and try to group some of the questions together if we get a lot of common ones. But keep an eye on the chat. If our team reaches out and asks you, you can answer. You can ask your own questions. So we've got some prepared questions to float by the panelists, and then we're definitely interested in making sure you get the information that you need. So I will start, and I will introduce our team, the ERI SolSmart team, also the policy and implementation team at the Environmental Resilience Institute is myself, Therese Duro. I lead the McKinney Midwest Climate Project. I'm also the Assistant Director for Climate Policy and Implementation here at ERI. I work very closely with Annika Gore, who is the Resilience Programs Coordinator, and she manages the Resilience Cohort and our SolSmart relationship and several other programs. We also have Brianna Christensen, who is a fellow with us here at ERI. She's a graduate student at the O'Neill School. And then I'll introduce the rest of our panelists after I give a little bit of context for today's conversation. ERI is your local partner for getting started with SolSmart. We're working directly with SolSmart as an engagement partner to try to just facilitate the process of bringing Hoosier communities into the SolSmart designation program, answering any questions that you have, and just being your point of contact for getting started. So we're here, we're local, we've worked with SolSmart before, and definitely interested in helping your attempt to be successful. So the really high level gist of why SolSmart exists is really to help communities get solar ready. So SolSmart helps. Did I just mess up the screen share? I did.
Yes.
SolSmart helps cities, towns, organizations, or regional organizations and counties become solar energy leaders. That's the really high level. Our web page for our solar resources is here on this page as well. Brian's going to get into a little bit more details about what SolSmart is and what it technically does. But there are a lot of benefits to local governments to getting SolSmart designated. There's a lot of support in the program, so you're getting access to expert assistance, tools, and trainings. You're also forced to, for better or worse, strengthen some community partnerships that are going to make your solar in your community more successful. And you're also opening the door to additional publicity and recognition, state, regional, and national recognition for your community's goals and your community's successes. Being designated has a lot of benefits in terms of job creation and economic development, attracting solar installers and solar projects, supporting your small businesses and growing local jobs. That's one of the big perks of solar energy, is that those jobs cannot be outsourced. They have to be hands-on in your community. Solar helps reduce energy costs for the businesses and residents in your district, and also helps generate positive press for your community, your government, and your economic development initiatives. And then SolSmart is at the root an efficiency program, helping governments streamline processes, cut through red tape. Going through the steps of getting SolSmart designated can really help you be prepared for grant opportunities when renewable energy funding comes along. Helps you increase energy independence, which is a great resilience tactic to help you prepare for emergencies. Achieving designation, maybe sounds fancy, but really it's a checklist of criteria. You earn points. It's similar to a lot of other programs for local governments. There's several different categories you can earn points in, including permitting and inspection, market development. Here's a photo of some training that Evansville offered or that the NAACP offered in Evansville, which helps support their efforts to get SolSmart. And then you achieve, based on the number of points you earn, you achieve a certain level of designation. There are many different pathways to designation. So if some of these categories end up with a lot of points, but some end up with fewer, almost every community is going to be able to find a pathway to designation. ERI in 2021 actually helped 9 Indiana communities achieve designation. Those communities were participants in our resilience cohort that summer. So I want to introduce our panelists for today's roundtable. I'm really grateful to have some hands-on community experts with us today. I do want to introduce Brian Ross. He's the Vice President of Renewable Energy at the Great Plains Institute. Great Plains Institute was our partner when we did the resilience cohort in 2021. They've been a long time SolSmart supporter, and they're very familiar with the technical assistance offered. So Brian has a good kind of Midwest view of how solar gets implemented in communities, and we're really happy to have him. Where are my notes? Oops, sorry, I did it again. Like too many screens is actually making it harder. Okay. Next we have Allison Seidel from Richmond, Indiana. Allison wears many hats, but she also serves as a resiliency coordinator with Earth Charter Indiana and has been on the Richmond Sustainability Commission really since the beginning. So Allison is very entrenched in her community and was helped the community get SolSmart Silver in 2022. Glenn Gilbert also wears many hats, a retired director of facilities at Goshen College, among many other roles that you served at Goshen College, and a volunteer to help Goshen get SolSmart Gold in 2017. And then we have Nancy Moldenhauer, who's from Michigan City, very involved in Indiana Dunes advocacy, a member of the Sustainability Commission, and instrumental in Michigan City achieving SolSmart Silver in 2022. So I'm going to first hand it over to Brian to give you just a really brief introduction based on his expertise. And then we're going to hand it over to Allison, Glenn, and Nancy to just give us a little capsule of what it was like to roll out SolSmart in their community. So just a reminder, as questions come up for you or you want to come back to a topic or a comment, just throw that in the chat. Annika and Brianna will be monitoring that, and they'll pull up your tidbits for conversation when we get to the more open part of the presentation. Okay, Brian, I've got your slides. Please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Teresa. This is great to be here and talk to all the people from the Hoosier State. We really had a great partnership with ERI, and glad to see this is really continuing moving forward. The Great Plains Institute is a nonprofit organization that's based out of Minneapolis. We do a lot of our work in the Midwest across a broad range of states. We do some work nationally. Our broad mission is really about decarbonizing our economy for the benefit of people, economic growth, and the environment. And we work across a variety of different emission sectors and technologies. I am the director of the Renewable Energy Program and have been involved in the SolSmart program pretty much since the start of it. I was on the initial kind of formation of the criteria committee before the program even started. And we had a pre-SolSmart kind of certification program that we ran with some across several states with some NGO partners before it even started. So been in the space for a long time. Okay, go to the next slide. And kind of one of the messages that I want to impart to anybody who's on the call today, that if you take away one thing from this, is to recognize that in the clean energy future, all communities are host communities. In the transition, I'm sorry, in the conventional energy system that we're coming out of, where we had centralized power plants, where we had some communities with fossil fuel resources, coal mines, oil and gas reserves, things like that. There were a few communities that were hosting the energy system, things like transmission lines, et cetera. In the energy future, all communities are host communities because every community has an economically viable solar resource. And therefore, it is like you have discovered, if you thought of your community as having suddenly discovered oil, you would know that there would be people who would want to take advantage of that. Well, we have discovered an equivalent of that with solar energy. It is a economically valuable resource that can be measured, tangibly valued, just like any other kind of energy resource, and people are going to want to take advantage of it. And every community will be hosting solar energy systems in particular, and some will also be hosting other forms of energy. But the important thing to recognize here is that this is an economic asset in your community that people are going to want to take advantage of. Just looking at the rooftop solar reserve, and we've calculated this several different ways, most communities are seeing that the rooftop solar reserve, in other words, the economic resource that is on the rooftops of your communities, is at least 25 to 30% of your total electric use in your community. We have calculated this for a number of different communities. We've actually seen there are some that are approaching 80 or 90% in terms of a kind of economic potential that could be reached. And this is something that you have to recognize, of course. This is not a matter of whether or not you're pro-solar or anti-solar. Solar is coming, and communities need to understand how to deal with it. And SolSmart is one way to do that. Okay, next slide. So in the face of this transformation that we're all in the middle of, kind of moving from the conventional energy system to the clean energy system, communities are suddenly faced with kind of an overwhelming task frequently of figuring out how to navigate this space. And we see this in the rooftop world for solar. We see this in the large-scale solar farm world. What is a community to do? And where are the resources that you have in terms of making sure that as this market moves forward, it's going to reflect your community's priorities and your community's assets and existing economic base and culture. So go to the next slide. So SolSmart has been in place for 6 years now. It is the National Designation and Technical Assistance Program, as Teresa already kind of went over. They have helped over 500 local governments, and I was going to look up the exact number, and I didn't before the call, but it's over 500 local governments navigate this clean energy future so that we have transparent and predictable processes so that people on both sides of the counter, at the local government level, when someone comes over and wants a permit or a zoning change, everybody knows what the standards are. Everybody knows how to move ahead, and it reduces controversy and allows for communities to really integrate this into their own community. A SolSmart designation really recognizes that communities have addressed those local barriers and have demonstrated that they know how they want to move into this clean energy future with the kind of standards they have in place. Okay, next slide. So SolSmart really is of great benefit to communities. The certification itself is important, and we really want people to achieve it. But frankly, the best thing about the SolSmart program is the no-cost technical assistance and resources that have already been developed by national experts, as well as people who know your state and your region, to know how to navigate this future. It is a relatively straightforward effort to sign up for the program. It has a great deal of technical resources that you can tap in. The SolSmart program, especially in the second phase that started a year ago, is really focused on meeting the federal Justice 40 goals to make sure that we're not only doing solar development, but we're doing so in an equitable manner, and we're getting to those communities that typically have the least amount of resources in order to navigate this clean energy future. That's very important. We just don't want this to be a place, an opportunity for communities that already have resources, but also recognize that we need to focus on those communities that have fewer resources and need more assistance. So the SolSmart is really here to help, and the certification is kind of the icing on the cake. But the main thing we want to get people into is to help them kind of understand how they can make this solar energy market move ahead in a way that's going to reflect their community's priorities. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we've done, the Great Plains Institute did, and we actually did this is actually stuff that we developed prior to SolSmart, but has been largely incorporated into SolSmart over time. And that is kind of recognizing what the communities need to do. And we have 5 kind of principles that communities need to think about in terms of addressing this clean energy future. One is you have to address your policy in your community, which is usually in the form of a master plan or a comprehensive plan, where you describe solar resources in your community, recognizing that it's an economic resource, just like oil or gas or anything else in your community that has value. Encouraging development that's appropriate, and setting development goals for solar in the same way that you would set housing goals or other things like that. You need to change your development regulations, which is typically your ordinances, in order to explicitly address solar development in its varied forms. A solar panel on a rooftop is not the same kind of thing as a solar panel on a solar farm. There are different kinds of land uses, even though they're both solar. We need to kind of help people navigate that space and have it make sense within them. We need permitting processes at the local level that are predictable, transparent, and clearly documented. This is a critical part of SolSmart, and one that we actually spend a lot of time on as technical service providers. Between the zoning and the permitting, I would say that that's probably about 80% of the technical assistance that occurs, because those are the things that local governments all do, and though they're all affected by the clean energy transition. The 4th point is public sector investment in the community's own resources, which are things like, how do you put it on your city hall? How do you have a space, land outside of town that you have an option on, and somebody wants to do a solar farm or a solar garden? How do you navigate that? What is something that makes sense for your community in terms of the public sector investment, demonstrating that this is an economic asset, and to bring down costs of things like internal costs that puts upward pressure on taxes. And the 5th thing is local programs that the community may have, that in order to limit market barriers and to enable the equitable private sector solar development. If you think of things like affordable housing that you do in your community, how are you integrating solar into that? That is a local program, and there are ways to do that to make sure that in that affordable housing development, that you're actually making sure that those residents are going to have access to clean energy resources and the cost savings that come with that. Okay, so next slide. So really, that's kind of my quick summary of SolSmart and why it is important to engage in it. A lot of the work that we do as technical service providers is kind of navigating these small things that communities do every day, but you need to kind of look at all the different aspects of this in order to understand how your community is going to navigate this solar energy future, and to make sure that you're capturing the local benefits of that solar development as it moves forward. And I'm glad to hear we have several communities here that are going to describe how they're going to do that, and I will hand it over to them now.
Great. Therese, do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, please dive in. So we're going to have each of our 3 communities talk about their motivation for pursuing designation, and a little bit about the logistics, who they worked with and how long it took, and then some of the benefits that they've seen from that. So Allison, thanks for going first.
Sure. I'm Allison Zeidel. I'm from Richmond, Indiana, which is in the east central side of the state. I serve on the Environmental Commission. As Therese said earlier, I've been on that commission for a long time, but I also serve as the resiliency coordinator through Earth Charter Indiana, and I used to be the executive director of an environmental center here. So our motivation for pursuing the designation was actually, we saw a presentation or saw materials, I can't remember which one, at one of the Earth Charter conferences, one of the climate conferences, about SolSmart. So we contacted them and worked together with them to determine whether our community was a good fit for it, which it was. We also have a lot of industrial solar going in our community right now. So we have, we're going on our 8th solar park right now. Richmond at peak time is generating approximately 29% of our power through solar. It's generated here, so it's shared on the IMPA network, on the Indiana Municipal Power Agency network, but goes to the closest need. So next year they're hoping that we will be at about 36% or something like that. So we're producing about 47 megawatts right now. So in our community right now, solar is not a bad word, which is wonderful. Wind is a bad word in our community. Solar is not. So it's been wonderful. We haven't had to fight too much. But we noticed that there were just virtually no private solar installations in Richmond, almost none, and couldn't really figure out why. And so that was part of our impetus for, going for the designation. In our community, so we are an IMPA community, so we're kind of different. We are part of the Indiana Municipal Power Agency. So we have our own municipal owned power plant that is a coal power plant, and Richmond Power and Light runs that. So they are in a relationship with IMPA. So we worked very closely with Richmond Power and Light on this SolSmart project, really not with IMPA. RP&L was kind of the, if we needed any help from IMPA, RP&L was kind of the moderator there. And then we worked with our planning department. Our GIS coordinator at the time was very climate savvy and wanted to make sure that this went through. So we grabbed the planning department and our power agency, and then used my Earth Charter time. So that was really helpful. Probably the most helpful thing is we just made ourselves meet weekly on it, because this can get pushed to the bottom of the list pretty easily. So we just, every single week, we made ourselves sit down, and some weeks we sat down and stared at each other and we were like, we have not done anything and this is dumb. But we would kind of roar ourselves back together, and we got through the list, which was awesome. It took us probably a little over a year to get through things, give or take. We had a lot of changes in the Richmond government, and usually when there's a change in the government, stuff gets put on my plate because I'm not government. And that's great and terrible, because I have 3 other jobs. And so it was a little tricky, but the benefits we've seen have been tremendous, actually. We didn't realize that RP&L felt fairly nervous about residential solar, and partially it was because they had been burned by people installing systems and not telling them about it. So that safety concerns were instantly, obviously, in place. They were really frustrated. So the SolSmart process in making us do a solar landing page, it seems silly that that's like the one thing that kind of made everything so much easier, but we were able to meet with them and meet with Richmond Power and Light and work through the landing page and make a checklist together that we both agreed on of what somebody would have to go through in order to become ready to install, and like who they needed to call first. And they always needed to start with RP&L. And unbeknownst to us, RP&L was thrilled then, because they didn't have these, they knew that we would be really championing that and also pushing people to call them instead of going underground to try to install these kind of makeshift systems. So that landing page, even though it's a really simple piece, was really powerful for us, because it started that really strong relationship with RP&L, where we both knew kind of what we were fighting for, and that we were both on the same page, and we wanted to make it safe and also accessible. There were no words about solar outside of the solar parks on the RP&L page. So you couldn't find, if you could install solar, you didn't know it. And now we have our net metering page, and that links then to the solar checklist, so you actually know what to do. So a lot of the benefit for us came from, just that very simple start of this really strong relationship now that we have with RP&L. But I'll default to somebody else, and we can go back to other questions later.
Thank you, Allison. Glenn, I'll have you go next.
Okay, thank you. It's been several years since I've thought much about SolSmart, because we completed our SolSmart process in 2017. And those of you who have been involved in solar in Indiana in particular would know that 2017 was the last year that net metering in its full opportunity was an option. So shortly after that, it gradually has been diminished until now net metering is no longer an option. But at that time, that served as an incentive for our community, because we had a whole bunch of people that were motivated to get in under that end of December 2017 deadline. So unlike Richmond, we have preponderance of residential installations. That's been that got a real boost in 2017 with SolSmart. Backing up, it was the task that, SolSmart, a staff person from SolSmart actually educated us in our community. And one of the first things we did was build a website on our Goshen City webpage that's still there. So we encourage people to go right to that website, and there you'll find links to NIPSCO, our utility, a list of the ordinances that need to be met, and kind of a step-by-step process. If you are a residential person and you don't know where to begin, that is a very helpful place to begin. SolSmart also helped us think through how to aggregate our interest and how to educate people prior to them approaching an installer. One of the things that every installer struggles with is the amount of time that is spent in education that may or may not lead to an actual sale of solar. Because we were doing that upfront education and kind of the preliminary screening and answering those initial questions that almost every residential person has, because we were kind of laying that groundwork. Installers were eager to work with us and give us a better price because we had done the work that they had been doing gratis. And so when our participants went and approached the installer, they already kind of knew the language, they knew the layout of the land, they knew how to what they needed to provide in terms of information, and that moved the projects along. So in our little community of 30,000 people, we had over 70 new solar residential installations during that time. And one of the things that we all know about solar is the single most reason that people install solar on their home is because their neighbor did. And that's been the result, because we had a rather large number of people that participated in 2017. In the subsequent years, even now, we're still getting many residential solar installations because their neighbor down the road did, and people talk and people are excited about it. And you can't invent that word of mouth. It just happens, and that's what has been really encouraging for us. We have some large solar farms in the planning stage outside our municipality and our county, which is a rather conservative county. We had a large proposal for a solar farm. It got rejected by the county council. But what they did is send it back to the drawing board. And since then, the county has worked at establishing zoning guidelines and construction guidelines that were not onerous. And so when they returned and revisited it, it did pass. And we do have a solar farm in the planning stages now because of the government doing their homework and providing guidelines and structures for how to do it. So that's been our experience. 2017 feels like a long time ago, but solar is still very alive in our community. We have we like to brag that we are in the up there with the top 10 cities in the United States for solar per capita, which is of course the key word, but we would be right there between Phoenix and Denver, Colorado in terms of the amount of solar installation per capita in our community.
That's so great, Glenn. And thank you for giving such a good example of how SolSmart designation on the government's part merged with a solarized campaign on the public, getting community members engaged. A lot of communities, I think, have seen success doing both campaigns at the same time. You're fixing some of the logistical issues, but then you're also encouraging installations at the same time.
I think one more thing I'll add is that SolSmart was instrumental in encouraging our city government to train firefighters and people who had this, for a number of reasons, of fear of what it meant to fight a fire with a solar installation. All that training took place prior to our rolling out of this program, so that not just City Hall, but city employees throughout the community had a more positive attitude towards solar.
Thank you. All right, Nancy, how'd it go in Michigan City? That's pretty recent. I know your accomplishments there.
Thank you very much. I'm Teresa. And I'll have to say that, well, I'm going to introduce myself first. I'm the immediate past chair of the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. And I stepped down because I'm actually running for city council in Michigan City. And my primary reason for doing that is to be able to promote solar and larger solar projects in our city. Having somebody as an elected official is really going to help us out as far as expansion of solar. I also want to talk about what prompted us to do it. First of all, we saw the announcement through Indiana University, but I'll have to say, Michigan City, we really like to be the first in Northwest Indiana. We have a competitive edge about us, so that motivated us. Supposedly, Gary was in the race with us also for bronze status, and we decided we were going to go for silver. And we got silver, and then Gary got nothing. So we're extremely proud of that. Also, we want to promote green, clean energy in our community, so it's a healthier place to live. Many of you may not know, but NIPSCO has one of their main coal-powered generating stations. So we thought this is a good way to counteract the pollution issue in our community. And then finally, it's the status. Having a designation from the United States Department of Energy is something that's really significant, that you can say the federal government has certified what we're doing here. I had really close partnership with our planning and inspection department in order to make this happen. I'm very clear this would not have happened if Skylar York, who's the director, had not handed Sue Downs, his major inspector, over to us and instructed her to be completely available and to help us make this happen. If it hadn't been for Sue, we would not have been able to overcome a number of the information gaps we had, and also some of the obstacles that we ran into. She was able to work us through those successfully. Let me see. How long did it take? This is interesting. It was just a little over 1 year, and I keep my emails. So it started March 25th of 2021, and we received our designation April 20th of 22. So I will have to really acknowledge the Indiana University Environmental Resilience Institute. If we hadn't been having those weekly meetings where I had to report out, we would not have been as diligent about this whole process. So I don't know what it was, but Andrea Webster always called on me first for some reason, and that made us work really hard. This was done totally through a volunteer effort. We had, no director of sustainability or anything like that. We're a commission of 9 people. And then we have 4 student commissioners who work with us also. And I'll have to give a shout out to Tristan Bogart, who's one of our high school commissioners. We did this during COVID, and he kept on me of finding different ways to get the information that we needed, because we weren't able to meet face to face with anybody. And he was always saying, can you do it this way? What about this, the other thing? The final piece, we were allowed to come into the department that keeps all the records. I'm not going to think of whatever it is, but they finally let us come in because Tristan was bothering them so much. We were all masked up. We were on the other side of the glass divider, and they handed us all the records we needed to be able to figure out how many solar installations, what the power was on the Michigan City municipal buildings. So that was one of the last things we had to drop in, and we made it. I really want to emphasize the importance of including our youth in whatever we're doing regarding clean energy. They're an important source of information and extreme motivation. So really consider them as a partner in the project too. Benefits to our community. It's been very interesting because since we put up the information on the municipal website, the Michigan City Sustainability Commission actually has their own page, and we were able to list all the information. So we've been educating and motivating people ongoingly in our community about solar panel installation for their businesses and homes. We have seen people independently without the partnership with Solar United Neighbors go ahead, put it on, get it inspected, get it turned on. We saw our first small business installation in the Uptown Arts District this summer. It's on a hair salon. Also, we have a gentleman who has a solar panel array field that's out on Paz Roads near the high school. He's generating and selling electricity to NIPSCO. So I'll have to say there's been sort of this ripple effect that we've seen in our community because we went after the SolSmart silver designation. The other thing is we've deepened our relationship with the NAACP. We have a program that's called Soul Power. So far we've trained, we have 23 certified individuals in solar panel as assistants or as installers. And out of those 23, there are 30 certificates that have come out of that. And our next program is going to be the design component. And we've just been, the NAACP has been writing a grant for that. I just wrote a letter of support for that to be turned in. So hopefully we'll be able to offer the third level, which is the design and the ability to actually start a small business. This is targeted towards persons of color and also towards those who are, I'll just call them the unemployed or the underemployed. And we also include felons in this program. So that can be a pathway for them to have gainful employment. By going through the Soul Power program, they're on track to become a card-carrying union electrician with the local International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So I will just have to say, just looking at those things that have happened, and I'm doubtful that all of those would have happened. They may naturally have percolated on their own, but certainly Soul Power designation has lit a fire under people and really gotten them excited about clean energy production in our community.
Thank you so much. It was so great to hear about all of your stories. I've got a couple of questions that I'll pose to the panel, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. So if something is coming up for you and you want to ask your question, please type it into the chat. And Annika and Brianna will help us decide which questions we get answered here. But we will try to follow up with answers to other questions and resources we'll share the solar landing pages for each of these communities so you can kind of see what they look like also. Each of you mentioned, some of the departmental communication gaps that you experienced or utility conversations that had to happen. And it's great to hear how you overcame those challenges. Were there any other challenges in achieving designation that really stand out to you as something you had to overcome to get moving?
I mean, for us, it was time. It was just SolSmart made it very easy. I sound like I'm doing a commercial for them, but they made it super, super simple. And they were very quick to reply with any of our questions that we had. But for us, it was just making the time to kind of get through the checklist, because as you're working through the checklist, you're copying links to be your proof. So you're finding things, and then you'd go find something and it wouldn't be right. So then you'd have to go to the city website and change it to make it right. And so just the sheer time that it took to kind of get all the details right, and making that time, as I said earlier, by saying every single week, we're going to meet about SolSmart and try to get this done. That was really our only stumbling block.
Yeah. Glenn, what were some of your challenges in Goshen?
Well, I keep trying to think of how to answer that question, and the truth is, I don't remember very many challenges. We were fortunate to have a mayor who, it was his platform from the beginning to promote sustainability in our community. He paved the way. He brought the engineering and the various city offices together to work on this, provided staffing, was motivated to get it done. We had a community that was fired up to install solar. I wish I could answer your question like you want us to, but the truth is, it was a very positive experience for us, and at least in my memory from way, way back there in 2017, it was nothing but a positive experience.
Well, it's interesting to see how Goshen's experience has helped mitigate some of the challenges that Elkhart County experienced when they were considering the larger scale. They were like, oh, maybe this is something we should look into. And it sounded like they really tried to collaborate with the installer. That's very cool.
Yeah. Our challenge initially was not having the support of the mayor. He did not understand solar. And I can remember on a Friday afternoon after his office was closed that we were talking about the importance of doing this. And we actually missed a couple deadlines with IU, and thankfully they kept extending those for us. And finally, I just said, I'm not getting off this phone. I know you're off work. I know I'm supposed to be up in Michigan vacationing right now, but it's really important on Monday morning when you get into the office to sign the paperwork. And it's only going to cost the city a few $1,000s. And he indicated, I don't have the money. I said, well, if you don't have it, we'll do a fundraiser in the community and we'll come up with whatever we need. So we were sort of, I call us the stealth bomber. We're flying under the radar all the time here in Michigan City because we know we do not have a supportive administration, but our city council is behind us. So at least we have, that one branch of local government.
Yeah, thank you. I think all three of you have touched on kind of leadership attitudes about getting a SolSmart designation. And thank you, Nancy, for mentioning cost. Glenn or Allison, do you have a sense of whether there was an expense for the city in pursuing designation?
Yeah, for us, it was only in the GIS coordinator's time, really, since my contribution of my time was from Earth Charter. We really didn't have a lot, and we used the resources, as Brian had said, those resources were wonderful. So we used those for training and such. So there was a little bit of staff time for training, but no, we felt it was very, very minimal cost, and certainly something that we kept saying, since this is funded, it's free, we're already paying for it because it's, part of the Solar Foundation. It's free. It's something that we should be taking advantage of anyway. And we really didn't get any roadblocks thrown up for that, even for the use of the staff member time.
That would be, I think, our experience in Goshen too. I was a volunteer. I was more involved in training and promoting. And so I wasn't working with that component of it very much, but I don't remember anybody bemoaning the cost of implementing this.
Yeah, well, SolSmart has been a well-funded and well-supported program. Brian, I'll ask you if some of the communities you've worked with, if they experience any costs or significant challenges in achieving designation that we haven't already talked about.
Sorry, you have to unmute. The costs are, I think, has already been outlined. There are no direct costs involved really to the city for SolSmart designation other than staff time, which is not insignificant. I mean, kind of frequently the delays as a technical service provider that we would see in getting people through the process was somebody who was in charge of it would just suddenly get swamped with work and they disappear for 3 or 4 months. And that's just a reality of local government. I mean, in any kind of program that we have to deal with. I would say that probably the single biggest area that we struggled with as technical service providers was in the permitting side, the kind of points associated with building code and electric code work, because that department tends to be a little bit more separated, at least in some states, from the rest of local government. A lot of times they're beholden, they feel like they're beholden to state codes rather than to local codes, and kind of bringing them into the fold and saying, no, really, you need to work with us on this too, sometimes was a little bit more of a challenge. We did usually, I would say the last things that people would achieve in terms of kind of prerequisites or points usually were the permitting side of things. So it is important to bring your permit officials into the fold as early as possible.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation about that dichotomy of responsibility that the building department has. Let's see what else we want to ask. I know Glenn, Goshen was really motivated by the net metering timelines and accelerated your SolSmart and your SolarRise process to get in for those deadlines. So I'm interested for Nancy and Allison, with your later designations, did people bring up net metering and were they concerned about the solar market and concerned about spending time on SolSmart designation because of the changes in the solar market in Indiana?
Not as much for us, but, oh, sorry, Nancy, did you
No,
already?
go ahead, Allison.
Not as much for us, but that's because SB 309 did not immediately affect us because we were a municipal owned utility. So and IMPA was trying to align with it then the year after, and we kind of pushed that off. So our net metering has been a little weird and a little different than most of the rest of the state. But nobody really brought it up. The people in Richmond who are doing residential solar at this point are mostly doing it for environmental reasons. We would like to get it to the point where we, you know, have a situation where we can be helping low cost and, you know, more vulnerable families having access to it, but not there yet, but we're getting there.
I would say most people didn't know about and didn't understand net metering anyhow. So when it came to an end on December 31st, 2022, in our area, I don't think it made any difference, to be honest. I've seen people moving ahead with their idea of installing and actually installing solar panels. You do save money regardless. You know, I got mine up and running just like 2 weeks before the deadline. And, you know, we're seeing solar energy bills of $30. No, these are my utility bills, which are $30 a month during the fall and winter. And then during the summer, it bumps up to $40 a month. And when I tell people about that, they go, oh, wow. You know, and then they're really interested looking at their, you know, $100 plus $200 energy bills during the summer months. So I think there's an economic drive up here in Northwest Indiana. NIPSCO now, unfortunately, has some of the higher rates regarding electricity in the whole state. And net metering, I just think it was something that confused the issue, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Brian, do you have anything to add about talking about the benefits of solar and being a solar friendly community in a state where the incentives aren't quite there?
Once again, muting. Indiana, I will say, is a little bit unique in the Midwest in terms of kind of the policy that is less supportive, I will say, for kind of private sector solar installations than you would see in almost any of the other states in the Midwest. And so you guys, I think, are figuring out, you guys are in some ways leading the way about the kind of navigating that space, about how you make solar work in a place that where policies aren't necessarily supportive. These state policies are not supportive of that. It is in some ways kind of a nice laboratory for kind of ensuring that we can actually see this happen within the marketplace and kind of move it forward. It does rely a little bit more, you know, the people who are doing these installations usually are a little bit more interested in the kind of climate or environmental benefits than you might see otherwise. It's not purely an economic decision because the economics of it just aren't as good when you don't have kind of some of the supportive policies that you might see in some of the other states. And I could, as someone who has worked for many years in a previous job as a consumer advocate in the utility field, I have many things to say about this, but I will refrain from them now, other than thanking you guys in Indiana for kind of showing us how you can still do this in spite of policies that aren't necessarily friendly.
And I think, you know, SolSmart has so many pathways and some new pathways to getting designation that I think emphasize the other benefits, like the government efficiency, building partnerships, like the fact that now volunteer commissions are much more engaged in different aspects, different departments of government. with the local utilities, those conversations, bringing in the building department and helping them feel like they're part of implementing community values. And getting ready for some of the big federal opportunities that may be coming. I know there's several grants for statewide solar programs. There's going to be a statewide climate action plan that's going to unlock some funding. So local governments being ready for individual solar installations is, I think it's still a smart move. I'd like to move now to a couple of audience questions. We have about 5-6 minutes. Anaga, do you want to pick a favorite question and throw it out to the group?
Yes, I think Lindsay had asked this question to Brian in particular. I think, Brian, when you were speaking about how building codes and permitting departments feel like they're beholden to the state and not the local governments, Lindsay was asking, are you speaking to Indiana specifically or generally with respect to compliance?
Well, yeah, that was our finding is we've looked across a number of different states. I would not say that that's an Indiana specific issue, but it is something that most states will either. We have some states that mandate a building code that the local governments do not have the option to depart from. We have other states where some municipalities are allowed to, and others where all municipalities are allowed to depart from the state code. But in all instances, there usually is a state code, and so that kind of, which in many ways is a good thing, but it does lead to this kind of perspective that local policy, when it says we want to be a solar friendly community, doesn't apply to people who are beholden to the state. And in fact, that's not true. Even in states where I'm from, Minnesota, we have a maximum building code. Local governments can't depart from it, and literally the building officials are implementing the state code, even the local officials. But we have had to have a number of conversations saying, the state code people are supportive of SolSmart. It is not your job to get in the way of it because you think that it's not consistent with the state code. You are still beholden as a local official to the local decision, to the local policies supporting this. And there are pathways to do this that are in fact consistent with state building code, and you should be adopting them. So we've had that conversation a number of times. So I didn't mean that to be Indiana specific, I guess, to kind of go to the question. Hopefully I answered the question.
Anaga, what's another good question from the audience?
Yes, I think one of the things we like for our audience members to know in general is how they could do this as a volunteer, even if they don't have, a local government staff that's dedicated to the process. What could be some of the initial steps they take to get to a designation?
That's a great question. So how would a volunteer get started in supporting their local government pursuing SolSmart designation?
I can jump in there because as far as the city's concerned, I am a volunteer because the city doesn't pay me to do my work. So I think maybe the most important thing is going to the planning department first. This affected our planning department more than anybody else, just because of the permitting questions and the education and all of that stuff. It was really mostly them. So having an example of the worksheet that they give you, the worksheet is really lovely. It's got everything divided into like community operations and community engagement, and it just tells you what it lists it right out. So going with a screenshot of that or some piece of that, and if SolSmart would allow us, I'm happy to show ours, that kind of stuff, and then saying this is a free program. Let me be the one that initiates the meetings weekly and walks through it with everyone. And if we hit it, we hit it. And if we don't, we don't. But the process really, truly is very, very valuable. But I think the nervousness for us is we didn't quite understand what it meant to go through the process. So having that worksheet available for somebody to see literally what it means and what questions you're answering and what things you're having to check off on your list is really, really helpful.
If I could talk about community-based organizing that's going on, both Highland, Indiana and Valparaiso, Indiana. They have not had the cooperation of their city governments. And Highland went about it by forming a neighborhood interest group. So they started out like that, and then they eventually got an advisory commission appointed by their town council. And this next election, they're really hoping to turn over the people that serve on the town commission, on the town council. So they're hoping actually to get designation as a real, sustainability commission. So that's one way that people can go about it, gathering like-minded people, working on projects in that group, and then seeing if you could get an advisory status, and that could potentially lead to a commission.
I don't have anything to add because I was kind of riding the crest of the wave that was already being established from the top down. I realize how fortunate I am in that the city is in that regard. The other two shared their experience, and I think grassroots is really important if that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think recognizing that Mayor Pete used to always say community as capacity, in city governments that don't have dedicated staff, relying on your community members. But I think one of the threads of success is that each of you were empowered in some way as a volunteer to reach out and interact with local government officials. They were taking your meetings, they were willing to work with you on this project. And I think that's probably a leap that does need to happen. And for example, the hump that Highland will have to get over is, we're here to volunteer, but we also need you to be willing to work with us. Okay, I want to wrap it up. I want to say that we will go through all the questions, and if there's others that we can answer, we will answer them. We'll pull together some resources. Allison, I appreciate you mentioning some of the checklists. We'll work with our SolSmart team to see what other resources we can easily share with you. And just to give a little sense of what the next steps are going to be. We do invite you to join the other 15 Hoosier communities. Look at this happy bunch, Nancy. Join the other 15 Hoosier communities that are designated by pursuing designation of your own. And if you are wanting to get more information or talk more about it for your community, or so local governments, cities, towns, counties, regional organizations that work with local governments, please just reach out to ERI. Brianna, I threw your email in here, sorry. And we would love to just schedule a quick call with you and walk you through the process, and then ERI can help you get started if that's something that you and your local government partners are interested in. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for all the great conversation in the chat. We will definitely follow up and keep these conversations going so that we can support you, whether you're volunteer, or just interested, or whether you're representing a local government. Thank you so much for our panelists today for sharing your expertise that you've gained through this process.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.